Thank you. The Virginia, we made the news this week. The people they arrested just a couple days ago, they were trying to sell secrets about the Virginia submarine. And those are the ones that went to court yesterday or the day before, but that's what they were trying to sell. The FBMs, Fleet Ballistic Missile, these are the ones that are, they're submarines and they're nice, but they're boring. They go to sea and find a vacant piece of the ocean and sit there and hide. Don't make noise, don't move very fast, and they sit there and they do their drills. It's actually, of our triad nuclear deterrent, the FBMs are the strongest and most survivable. Clearly, our land-based missiles and the silos, I mean, the Russians and the Chinese have those marked down to the gnat's ass. Oops, excuse me. The planes that are flying that would carry a nuclear capability, they're susceptible. Okay, the submarines aren't. The submarines are great and a strong part of our nuclear deterrent. Okay, the next thing that you see, the Virginia class is now, it's going to be completed when they get to 40 submarines. They were at the construction of 2 a year, and then they backed off for a couple of years to 1, and now they're going back up to 2 a year. There's 2 shipyards capable. One is Electric Boat in Groton, and of course that makes Senator Blumenthal proud as a peacock because they come at $3 billion a copy. And then Newport News, Virginia. On the acquisition strategy, which is kind of interesting because we never did this before, but we forced these 2 shipyards to share their technology. On one submarine, Electric Boat does the front end, and Newport News does the rear. On the next boat, they change. And then they back again. And what it does is it forces them to share any discoveries that they make in the technology or the good way to do things in building that submarine, because both of them have half the submarine vested, and you don't want to hide that discovery, because the next boat you build the other half on, you want to make sure that the next one has the improvement that you found. So they do this back and forth. So our mother yard is Electric Boat. That's where we'll probably be christened. Of course, everybody wants to see whether they can get it commissioned next to the battleship Iowa. But the people that have asked me about the likelihood of that is, I say it's probably pretty dim, because to get the submarine from Connecticut to Los Angeles Harbor at the shipyard's risk, because the Navy doesn't take full possession of that submarine until Christy Vilsack, who's our sponsor, she says, man the ship and bring it alive. And that's the date of commissioning. Until then, the 2 shipyards are on the line all the way between now and then. So, and that's going to make for a difference, because we're getting some help from the Battleship Iowa group. One of the very first mods we're going to make, and they can't do it until then, is when the Navy takes possession of the submarine, we're changing out the crew's mess tables and putting in teak from the Battleship Iowa, because we want the people that man the submarine to have that character and have a piece of Iowa with them at all times, and that's a great joint cooperation. But they didn't put that in the original specifications they gave the 2 shipyards, so timing is one of the issues there. So the Columbia is the new boomer submarine. We call them boomers because that's what they do when they shoot their missiles. They go boom. And you'll read about that Columbia. These submarines, the Virginia submarines, go for $3 billion a copy. The Columbia is going to be more. Newport News is building our big new carriers. Those go for $13 billion a copy, and not always do the elevators work. So This is what you see, a little bit of what you've got on the cards, and each of you should take those with you. This talks generally, this is all unclassified. There's nothing that I'm putting out that would be considered classified, so it's all public sector information. And the whole numbers start 774. I love the number 797. It sounds like your next Boeing airplane, but it's not. We do have a joke in the Navy about there are more airplanes at the bottom of the ocean than there are submarines in the sky. Okay, one of the things we have, I'm going to pass this around. Taken. What I'm passing around is something that I got 2 years ago, and it was at the keel lane it was actually Quonset Point, Rhode Island, which is one of the electric boat facilities. It is the actual skin of the submarine, a piece of it, and it's what we say keeps the water out of the people tube. Very important. And it's called, in my day it was HY90. Now it's called HY100. What that means is 1 inch of this metal can withstand 100,000 pounds of pressure. And that's why this piece is particularly heavy. But this is not the full thickness of the skin of the submarine. This is just one of the pieces. So make sure you take a look at that piece, and that's why I started it around so everybody can get a chance to feel it. The naming was in 15 at the only Navy ROTC facility is at NROTC Ames. If any of you were following the news this last week, the ship's skipper and the weapons officer, Lieutenant Kelly Tackett, about this tall, and she's armed and deadly. She is really good. And the ship's senior enlisted, called Cobb. Cobb stands for Chief of the Boat. And the skipper is the #1 guy. Ostensibly, the executive officer is #2, but the Cobb is like #3. So very, very interesting. They came and they put in appearances at ROTC over in Ames. Big Navy paid for their trip out. And one of the reasons they come out is they talk to the ROTC folks, and they want to talk about what being a submariner is all about. What can you learn, how, and frankly, they're being salesmen. Here's why you ought to go serve in submarines. And that's what they did with the midshipmen at Ames on last Thursday. Friday, we had them over in the Cedar Rapids area. They were at the University of Iowa in the morning. And then they did, our chaplain for the commissioning committee is a former submariner, served on the Alexandria. He's the pastor at St. Jude's in Cedar Rapids. He was going into the Xavier Hall of Fame. So they went and paid a call on him at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And then if any of you were at the game with Penn State, the skipper, the Weps, and the Cobb, on the third commercial break into the second quarter, they were introduced on the field at the Iowa-Penn State game. And if you were there, what happened is the Cobb was going around and he says, "Somebody get me something." They got an Iowa cap. So he tucked it in underneath his combination cover, and they all got out there and they did their little introduction, and then Cobb takes his cover off, takes that Iowa cap and starts swirling it around. You got 70,000 fanatics all of a sudden cheering for the USS Iowa. It was really a cute move, and everybody had a lot of fun with it. So, Chris,
the commanding officer happens to be a graduate from Penn State. So, so he was out here as the commanding officer of the Iowa as a graduate from Penn State. So,
yeah, and he was actually cheering for Iowa.
Yeah, he was a bit in turmoil that day.
The point, the CO of the Iowa was a brat, so he really didn't have a stake growing up. And he is the one that came up with this design on the crest. And everybody has said, well, he's now really an Iowan, and that's true, because he was cheering for Iowa, and he really feels good about what he's done in his tour with Iowa. So it has worked out nice. Okay, the design being modular. When you build the outside skin, you have to realize each of these is like layered like floors in the building. You can't put it all through just big one round hole in the middle. You put it in when it's divided up, front and back, and you slide it in like this. You slide it in one piece at a time, one piece at a time. These things are built separately, and then they line them up, and then very slowly